Okay, in this video we're going to start talking about methods that are useful with lists. So in the previous video we talked about lists and how to create them basically manually and in how lists are formatted. Well, the beauty of lists is the fact that they are mutable, which means we can change them as we see fit. Okay, so in this command or this program, I should say, in this program, we're going to examine the .append method. Okay, so if you would like, go ahead, pause the video momentarily, and type in the code as you see it. Again, watch your indentation, look for your colons and such. Go ahead and type this in, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so now that you've done that, what do we got here? Well, we have a variable that we created called nameList, and it's associated to an empty list. Now, the reason I did an empty list is because of the way that the insert method, or the append method, the way the append method works. I got a variable here called again. This is going to be my loop control. Okay, this is what's going to allow me to start my loop, because the idea here is that I'm going to allow a user to type in as many names as they want and append them to the list, and then when they're finished they can then press anything other than Y and end the program. So while again is equal to either a lowercase y or again is equal to a capital Y. So I'm watching for both. I'm then going to prompt the user for input to have them enter a name. It's going to convert that to a string, and it's going to store that value as name. Then what we're going to do is we're going to call the list, so name underscore list, and we're going to have a dot append, and we're going to append the value of that variable. Okay, so in this case, name. So the key here is dot append. That is a method that adds an item to the end of the list. So it won't overwrite anything. If the list has values, it just tacks them on at the end, and that's the key here. We're going to print something here, print a statement that says, do you want to enter another name? It's going to prompt them for y equals yes or n equals no. They'll go ahead and make their selection, and this loop is going to continue on and on and on and on, so long as they either put in a capital Y or a lowercase y, because that's what we're looking for. Again, to be equal to either a lowercase y or an uppercase Y. Once they enter in something other than a lowercase y or a capital Y, this loop will terminate, and it's going to print out the names in the list. Now notice, it doesn't print out the actual list. It prints out the names. Okay, so that's why we did a for item in, name list, print the item. Okay, so if we run this, so go up here, run module, and enter a name. Oh, sorry. Enter a name. So I'm going to put in my name. Do you want to enter another name? Lowercase y. Enter another name. Alice. Do you want to enter a name? Okay, if I put a capital Y in, notice it still allows me. So Bob, let's say I want to do Eve, okay, Carol, all right. So as I'm entering these names in, then I get to this, I say, you know what, do you want another name? No, I don't. So I'm going to type an N, and then it sees my list, right, below are the names of the list, and then it goes through and prints out every name in that list. Okay? So the append is very effective in that it adds to the end of the list. Okay? Now, not only do we have a dot append, but we can also look for items inside of a list. Okay? And then what we can do is we can actually replace those values. Okay? So I've got a program here, and the idea with this program is we're going to look in a list, find a certain value, and change it. Okay? So go ahead and pause the video here for a minute and go ahead and type this in. Okay, now that you have it typed in, here's what we've got. So we created a list called food, and pick your choice of food. This is just what I was hungry for actually when I wrote this program. Pizza, burgers, fries, and ribs. Okay, these are all items on a menu that we might see. So what we're doing is we're printing a display here. We're printing a line of text that says, here's the current food menu. We're then just going to print the list. Okay, so we're not getting fancy here. We're just straight printing the list. And then we're going to say, okay, which item would you like to change? So they want to enter pizza, burgers, food, fries, ribs, right? So they have to type in one of those items that are in the list, and then we're going to convert that to a string. Store that as food item. Now, we got this method here, .index. Okay? So what .index does is it returns the index of the first element whose value is equal to that item. Okay? Now the key here is it does the first element. So if I had a menu item that said burgers, and fries, it would only get the first value. So if I said search for burgers, it would get just the first one, not the second one. Okay? If the item is not in the list, what you'll do is you'll get a value error exception and have to correct that. Okay? And we'll talk about those later down. We talk about exceptions. Just realize that if it doesn't find something in the list, you will get an error. So what happens here is it searches through my list and it finds the index value. Now that's the key here. It finds the index value of that element. So for example, in this case, fries, which is here, is index value 0, 1, 2. So what this does here is if I put in fries, item index becomes the number 2, right? Then I'm going to prompt the user to give me a new food item. Okay, so here's the new food item, converts it to a string, and then it's going to store that as new item. So I pick just something random, maybe steak or something else, or chicken, and that comes through. Then I'm going to take my food list that I create up here, and whatever that item index is. So for example, if I had a number 2, right? It'd be food and then 2 in here, say that equal to this. It'd be the same as doing something like this. So let's say that up here I said I wanted to change fries. Okay? So if I chose fries, that is index value 2, right? Because if you look, 0, 1, 2. Then down here, this becomes the value of 2, right? So item index is going to be equal to 2 based on this code. Then I go down here, enter a new item. So I say, let's put in steak, for example. Okay? So in this case, new item, if I can type this correctly, would get set equal to steak if I entered that. Then down here, it would be basically saying food item, the number 2, is equal to steak. Okay? And we know we can associate those values that way. All right? So let's see how this works. So we'll go ahead and run this module. All right, so here is the current food menu. You see I got pizza, burgers, fries, and ribs. So I want to change fries. I hit enter. And now it says, okay, enter a new food item. Let's put in what we said we're going to put in, steak. And you notice now you've got pizza, burgers, and then there's steak and ribs. Okay, we replaced fries with steak. So that makes it nice if you want to change a value in a list but not really know what the index value is. You can search it based on the element itself. So whichever one you want to change. The key is, though, to make sure that that item actually exists, because if it doesn't exist, then that becomes a problem. Okay, you'll get a value error and have to go from there. Now, not only can we do that, but if we want to insert lists or values into a list, okay? So in the previous two programs, we did an append, which we added append adds to the end of a list, right? So if I did an append of steak to this list, I'd have food, burgers, fries, ribs, and then steak. If I did the dot index, that allows me to pull the index value of one of these items or one of these elements, and then I can use that to do whatever I want. In which case, the last program, I was able to pick fries and switch it with a different item. What food, or I'm sorry, not what food does, so I'm thinking about food again now. What insert does is allows me to insert an item at a specific index value. Okay, so if I want to insert data into a list, I can do that using dot insert. Now, what happens here is we have our list, which is the same list as the last program. We're asking them to enter in a food item, right? So here's a list of current food, prints the list, and we say, okay, what item would you like to insert? So it's going to take that, convert it to a string, store it as this variable. We use the dot insert method. We tell it the index value in which we want to insert this element as. So basically here, if we prompt them, so let's say they enter in steak, and we will put steak at index value 0. It'd be the same thing as creating the list from scratch and putting steak first. Now, the key here is we will not overwrite the values in the list. Meaning when I add something in, it's not going to overwrite pizza. What it will do is it will put steak in front of pizza and move everything to the right. So currently pizza is at index value 0. When I'm finished, it will be at index value 1. And then we can do this with other things. Like if I want to insert it in between burgers and fries. Well, right now pizza is 0. Burgers is 1, fries is 2. If I want this to go between burgers and fries, I change this 0 to a 2. Okay? If I want to go between fries and ribs, well, it's 0, 1, 2, 3. I would make this a 3. Okay? So let's go ahead and leave it as 0 for now, and let's run this program to see how it works. So we'll run this. Which item do you want to insert? All right, so let's insert steak. And there you can see, now I have steak, pizza, burgers, fries, and ribs. Okay? All right, go ahead and pause the video if you need to. I forgot to do that before. Go ahead and pause the video now if you need to type this in. Okay, so let's change this now to a 2. Okay, let's try something different. And let's watch where it inserts this at. So if I run it now, with the index being 2 here, let's put in green beans, for example. Okay, now you can see 0, 1, green beans is now at index 2. It's between burgers and fries. So using dot insert can be extremely effective when you start doing some of these different lists. It really helps with some programming, okay? Especially when you manipulate lists, because you may not always want to add things to the end of a list. You may want to put them somewhere in between, and that's where insert can be hugely beneficial. So let's see, what else do we got here? Remove. The remove method is another method we can use that allows me to do just that. I can remove an item from a list. Now, the way the dot remove method works, and this is the key here though, is it will remove the first occurrence of the item in a list. Meaning, if I had pizza, burgers, pizza, fries, and ribs, and I said remove pizza, it will only remove that first instance of pizza, which means it would still say burgers, pizza, fries. Okay? So let's just look at this example. Go ahead and pause the video for a moment, and you can type this code in. All right. So now you see we've got these different ones up here. So pizza, burgers, fries, ribs. We print the menu. We prompt the user to give us, I probably should make this, you'd like to not insert, but remove, right? Because that's what we're doing here. Which item would you like to remove? We're then going to remove it. Now, it removes it based on that element value. So if I type in pizza, it's going to get rid of pizza. If I type in fries, it's going to get rid of fries, okay? And then the last thing it's going to do is going to print the menu. So if I run this, and save it. All right, so here we go. So now it says, here's the current menu. Let's go ahead and get rid of burgers. Okay? You notice now you've just got pizza, fries, and ribs left. Okay? Now let me show you what I was talking about with the first instance. I'm going to modify this a little bit. I'm going to put burgers in here a second time. Okay? So I got pizza, burgers, fries, burgers, and ribs. So I have duplicate elements in my list. So now if I run this as it is, and I type in burgers, okay, notice I got rid of the first instance of burgers that was between pizza and fries, but the second one's still there, okay, and that's the key. When we deal with the dot remove, it only gets rid of that first instance, and that in itself can cause headaches if you're not careful, okay. So dot remove is effective, and it gets rid of one of the elements in your list, one at a time. Now, if I wanted to remove both of them, what I would have to do if I wanted to remove both of them is I would have to put it in a loop, right? And have it loop around and around and around and around until it finally got rid of everything. Okay, so dot remove works pretty well. Here are some other methods, or these are actually functions that we can work with as far as lists. Okay, and these really are pretty self-explanatory. So go ahead and pause the video for a minute, and we can talk about this. It'll give you the ability to type in the program. All right, so now that you have done that, you got this typed in, let's talk about it. So what we have here is I just have a numbered list, okay? I just created some arbitrary numbers. It's actually 0 through 9, but I just put those in there in just a weird order. Now, we can use these different functions to do different things. To find the lowest value in a list, we do a min in the list. Maximum value, max in the list. We can sum the values, find the length of the list. You know, these here are pretty self-explanatory. If I want to find the average of the list, I take the sum of the list and divide it by the length of the list, right? Again, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then down here we can sort the lists. There is a dot sort method and a dot reverse method. And the idea is it allows me to put the list in either ascending order, which is what dot sort does, or reverse, right? So descending order, which is what reverse does. And you do that on the lists. So let's just check this out. So if I go ahead and run this just to show you what it would look like, you can see we got the lowest number is 0, the maximum number is 9, the sum of the values is 45, there are 10 items in the list, The average is about 4.5. Here's the list in ascending order. Here's the list in descending order. So again, I know that I kind of went through that one pretty quickly, but as you look at it, I mean, it really is pretty self-explanatory of what each of these different functions and methods do. Okay? Now, for the last one. The last thing we can do with lists is do something called slicing. What slicing does is allows me to decide which values in a list I want to display, or perhaps which ones I want to copy and move to other lists. So I can do a lot of different things. The premise here is we have to understand what the index values are of my lists. And as we talked before, when you go from left to right, it's 0 through 9. When you go right to left, it's -1 through whatever. Okay, so in this case, it'd be -1 to -10. Now, we don't get too hung up on negative values. You can do that, but for the sake of what we're doing here, we're going to stick with positives. So if you do just a colon, that displays the entire list. If you do just a single value, like 7, it displays the element at index value 7. So in this case, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It would display the number 8. This one here, now when we start putting these ranges in, it will start at index value 1. But it does not go all the way to 3. It goes to just 1 before that. So in this case, it would print index values 1 and 2, right? So it would print 2 and 3. Where we got 2 and 5, it starts at 2, so 0, 1, 2. It starts at 3 and goes to index value 5, which would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it would print 3 and 4 because the idea is it only does 2 through 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'd print 3, 4 in there, right? Because it goes up 2, but not all the way. This one here says print from wherever I want to start to the end of the list. And this one here says start at the beginning and go to this value. So by not putting a second number here, it assumes you mean the end of the list. By not putting a number in front of the colon, it assumes you're starting at the beginning of the list. Okay? So if you need to, go ahead and pause the video, and type this code in, and then we're going to execute it and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this. And here you go. So here, let's kind of do a little side-by-side comparison. The first one here, we did my list, and we did just a colon, so it printed everything. The second one, we wanted just index value 7, so it printed my 8. Here is values 1 and 2, because remember, we go up to 3, but we don't print 3, right? Index value 3. Here we did 3, 4, and 5, because again, we did 2, 3, and 4. 4 to the end, and then the beginning to the 6th index value. Now remember, these are index values, okay? They are not the numbers in the list. They are index values, okay? So index value 7 is actually element 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's actually element 8 at index value 7. So when we print 2 to 5, we go 0, 1, 2. We start at 3, right? So we go 2, 3, 4. So we print these 3 elements based on those index values, okay? And that's the thing we have to make sure we're aware of as we go through this, because it can be confusing. Just remember, the index value just tells me the location of a particular element in the list. Okay? Now, I know I went through those last 2 programs pretty quickly, but honestly, they're pretty self-explanatory. The printout that goes along with it explains the functions or the methods, or in this case, the slicing. So play around with that a little bit, toggle these numbers around a little bit and see what happens, kind of get a good sense of what happens. Now, the one thing I will tell you, let me show you an example here. If I do something like this, okay, this one right here, I say print list 3 to 3. If I run this, I want you to see what happens because I have come across this in some codes. So when I did in there, so the third one, 1, 2, 3, it did this, okay? It printed just the left and right brackets. Because you're saying start at 3, but you go up to 3, but technically 1 just before. It doesn't understand that you want to do that. If you want to print just index value 3, you do like you did up here with the 7. You just put the 3 there. Something else you have to keep in mind is you can't do this either, 3:2, because if I run that, as you see, I got the same thing down here. I got just a blank. These have to be separated by at least 1 if you're going to do a range, and you must put the lower number on the left and the greater number on the right. And this is the same case if you do negative values. You put the most negative number on the left and the less negative number on the right. Okay? Again, play around with that. And what I mean in that is like if I do something like this, -5, -2. Okay? You put the most negative value on the left and the less negative on the right. That's if you want to use the negative values. Okay? All right, so that's what we got for this. This is modifying lists. Again, we talked about append, how we can add to the end of the list. We talked about index, insert, sort, remove, reverse, and we also talked about minimum, maximum, length, and other various functions that allow us to manipulate lists. And always remember, okay, always remember, the reason why we can do this is because they are lists. Later we'll talk about something called a tuple, which is similar to a list, you just can't modify it. Okay? Lists you can modify, lists you can append, and do these various things with. Okay? All right. As always, if you have questions, feel free to contact me. If not, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.